With the release of Fast X, I figured it would be the perfect time to stop and rank all of the 11 movies in the Fast and Furious franchise from the worst to the best. Let's get started. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ben. On this channel, I love to talk about movies and TV, and if you also love to talk about movies and TV, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. This video is pretty straightforward. Basically, I'm just going to be going through my ranking of the Fast and Furious franchise from 11 to 1. Make sure to let me know down below in the comment section, what is your personal ranking? We're going to have different opinions. Some movies might be higher than others, but that's okay because film is subjective. Make sure to let me know down below in the comments. Now, with all that being said, let's get started. Easily coming in last place is Too Fast, Too Furious, a movie that kind of just feels like a music video at times. It's a total product of its time, and I feel like that's why it feels like a music video. It rushes through scenes with a bunch of editing montages that look pretty lame. In today's standards, at least, this movie is filled with horrendous dialogue, which kind of feels like a typical thing for the Fast and Furious movies at times. The movie features some off acting from even Paul Walker at times, who I think is basically the star of this franchise, and he probably will always be. Like, he's the one actor that I go to when I think of the Fast and Furious franchise, and probably my favorite character of the franchise. And you can just say that this movie is boring with terrible visual effects, truly bare bones writing, and an awful villain in Carter Verone who is just utterly forgettable. The movie is watchable, yeah, and I do give a lot of credit to Tyrese Gibson, who clearly seems like he's having a lot of fun. And I guess if you're looking to watch a bad movie that you might find some enjoyment in because it's so bad, maybe check out Too Fast, Too Furious. Above that is going to be Fast and Furious from 2009, a movie that is just plain bad. I'll give it this though, the movie opens with a great, engaging action sequence that is probably the highlight of the movie, which is a shame because then it just goes completely downhill from there. A big reason why I feel like this movie doesn't work is the fact that it doesn't really handle Letty's death all that well. It kind of handles it in a very melodramatic way, and especially with Vin Diesel's performance, he doesn't really feel all that committed here, I feel. And just the death of Letty as a whole feels anticlimactic. The story is pretty mediocre, and at times it is pretty boring. It goes on for too long though, plain and simple, and I think the really only enjoyable thing about this movie are the action sequences. But you're probably going to find me saying a lot in this video, is most of the highlights of these movies, even the bad ones like this, are the action sequences that save it from being a dumpster fire. And then unfortunately above that we have the newly released Fast X, a movie that I was hoping was going to be really good. But unfortunately it was just simply not. I'll leave my full review linked right up above if you want to go check out my full in-depth thoughts on it. But simply when it comes down to it, I just feel like this franchise should have ended a long time ago by now when you get to 2023 and you're at 11 movies in this franchise. The big saving grace is Jason Momoa's fun performance where he really gets to thrive in roles that I feel like he works best in. I just didn't find much to enjoy here with the not funny writing that really thinks it's funny but the jokes just fall flat. The story being an utter and complete mess spanning across multiple locations. I think they go to like totally different areas of the globe as a whole. I mentioned how the action is really the big thing that you go to in the Fast and the Furious movies, and the action in Fast X isn't that good. And not only is it not that good and not that memorable, but there's just not much of it. I'm also just now at the point in the Fast and Furious franchise where I don't really care for any of the characters, and it really sucks because by now you've built up so much depth to them that you would hope that I could care for all of them, but I don't really. And then just ever so slightly above that is the absolutely insane Fast 9, which just totally defies the laws of physics. There's something about the Fast and Furious franchise that has great opening sequences though. It sucked me right in, and I thought it was cool how they even did an older Universal logo with just little touches like that. And with the movie as a whole, I do appreciate the brotherly bonding aspect of it. At its core, it's a story of Dom reconnecting with his brother, but unfortunately that aspect just gets completely overshadowed by absurd writing. Thankfully the action is good, but the movie is once again all over the place with too many characters. The explanation for Han's survival makes zero sense. I don't know what the hell Cardi B is doing in this movie. The pacing is really off as well, and at the end of the day, this is just a bad movie. And then above that is the oddball of this franchise, the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. I think the first mistake that this movie made was honestly doing a Fast and Furious movie that doesn't have a likable lead. I feel like it's really important in any movie to have a lead that you like and you feel connected to on some level at least, but the lead here is just lackluster. Luckily though, this was the start of Justin Lin's tenure in the Fast and Furious Furious franchise, and he brings some nice directing in the action sequences, or more so racing sequences, because this is when the Fast and Furious was a movie about racing in cars. But the story just isn't the most investing, with pacing issues. There's an uninteresting subplot that totally slowed the movie down regarding the villain, and the backdrop of Tokyo in and of itself doesn't really add much to the movie, except just adding unnecessary fluff to the plot with a underground crime drama subplot. This is definitely one of the Fast and Furious movies that felt the most soap opera-y. As a whole, it's just pretty dull. At number 6, we have Fast and Furious 6, a movie that I think is fine. This is the point in the franchise when they had the best team, I feel, like the best solid core characters with some fun banter mixed in between. But ultimately though, this movie just doesn't really feel all that necessary in the grand scheme of things. And this was the beginning of the unbelievability. I mean, the fact that Dom survives a plane crash is just baffling. I mean, there's literally flames everywhere and he's still able to walk out with really very little scratches even. I think Luke Evans is an alright villain. They build him up to be like this huge threat, but I don't really feel that presence in the movie. He's just not all that menacing, and this movie just isn't as good as Fast 5. A movie that we'll talk about much higher up on this list. The action sequences there were a bit better, and the story was much tighter, and I feel like this movie would have benefited from a better story. Breaking us into our top 5 is Furious 7, the movie that is probably the most emotional out of this franchise. And that is of course due to the fact that Paul Walker ultimately died more than halfway through shooting this movie. And because of that, it is a bit easy to notice which sequences kind of had a body double stand in for Paul Walker with some visual effects on their face. They just had a placeholder actor that at times actually was even Paul Walker's real life brothers who kind of were stand-ins for him. They would obviously just change his face with effects to make it look like Paul Walker. On rewatch, I found that some moments in this movie kind of come off as cringy, not as good as they might have been on paper. I still find it so funny that they switched around the timeline just so they could have Han back and make this movie set before, for a little bit at least, Tokyo Drift, which I guess is like a prequel of sorts, but the timeline is all over the place with this franchise. I love the long action sequences that starts off with the cars falling from the sky, and then it just leads onto one of the best sequences probably of the franchise. That's where this franchise really works best, in the awesome action sequences. When they're done right, they are really good. There are a bunch of funny moments, but the movie definitely goes on for too long, with the story being a bit messy, and the third act just gets so over the top that by the time the see you again moment comes around, I don't really feel the impact as well as I probably should have. And if they really were going to end this franchise, this is where they should have ended it. But above that, I have the original The Fast and the Furious, a movie that I didn't really love for the longest time, but I've grown to enjoy it more and more over the years. A movie that I feel like is so enjoyable for all its cheesiness, and it's very entertaining because of that. Paul Walker has never been better. This is when he was the most charismatic and likable. And I'll give you the movie this: surprisingly, Dom as a character has a good amount of depth, especially when the movie takes time to learn about his past and losing his father, which obviously has a little bit more backstory later on in the movies. It's just low stakes. It probably takes itself a bit too seriously, and the editing and effects are pretty bad and obviously very dated, but the movie is over 20 years old now. It's crazy to think about how far we have gotten in this franchise, where this movie was just about pure street racing, a basic ripoff of Point Break, and now we have Fast X, which is just a bombastic action movie that honestly forgets what it really is about: cars. In third place, I have the real spin-off of this franchise, Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. This movie wasn't as good as I thought on first viewing. I really enjoyed it on first viewing. It definitely went down for me on rewatch. It's not terribly funny, unfortunately, which kind of sucks because the banter between Hobbs and Shaw really is what makes this movie really work. So had the writing have been even a bit more funny, this movie might have been even higher on this list. But the action is very well shot and choreographed per usual. It's from David Leitch. He directed this movie and he got his start in the entertainment business working behind the scenes with stunts. But I did find that the movie can get pretty repetitive at times, as it kind of just rehashes similar fights and sequences over and over. They have to look for something, they get it, and Idris Elba's character tries to take it, and then they just keep playing like a big game of cat and mouse. That just happens like 3 times over, and the movie can definitely feel the runtime at the end of the day, because it's over 2 hours and because of just over and over sequences, it gets a bit annoying at times. I admire how they bring more depth to Hobbs as a character though. You learn about his backstory, and that is always good when you have a prequel like this dedicating time to the characters that it's about. I think Vanessa Kirby is a superb addition to the franchise as well, and if they have so many characters now, they might as well just stick her in another one of the movies. At the very end, the final sequence in the rain, it's pretty cool. It visually looks very pleasing. The runner-up for me though is The Fate of the Furious, movie that I feel like I have the most fun with, arguably, out of this entire franchise. This is a sit back and relax and watch a bunch of stuff get blown up type of movie, and I'm okay with that. It's kind of weird how this movie works more for me than any of the other later Fast and Furious movies. I could tolerate the bonkersness in this one, but not in the other movies, because I feel like this is the one that just doesn't take itself that seriously. The prison break sequence is a big highlight, and the Hobbs and Shaw banter that we first see in the entire franchise in this movie, that's when I feel like it was at its best. And I'd probably say that Vin Diesel gives the best performance that he's given in any of these movies here. He's honestly pretty solid. Surprisingly enough, in the moments that he needs to show his emotions and really get emotional and get angry, that's when he really can bring it. And I'd argue that Charlize Theron might be the best villain of this franchise, probably was just topped by Jason Momoa though. Obviously as a character she doesn't play around, and I feel like Charlize Theron is clearly having fun. But the final 30 minutes are just delightful. The action is terrific. I just sit back and enjoy and watch it all on screen. But coming in first place, a movie that I feel like unanimously is regarded as the best of the Fast and the Furious movies, Fast 5. There's no denying how incredible the action is in this movie. Justin Lin behind the camera provides the best action of the franchise and wasn't able to even top himself later. This movie takes a more of a serious-er approach, I would say, and that's when it doesn't really feel too melodramatic-y, to me at least. It was nice to see and definitely appreciated, but that doesn't mean it forgets to give the audience a fun watch. The writing isn't great, the villain and the characters don't have that much depth in this movie, and the movie can slow down a little bit here and there. But this is a total popcorn flick. It has a great sense of a real team dynamic. There's cheesy lines of dialogue galore, but it's so enjoyable. It has the tightest story of the franchise, like I said earlier. I think the only downside to the fact that it has a tight story is the fact that the moment where Vince dies, the moment can feel pretty rushed because they're just moving on to the next thing right after it. Trying to keep that tight run time and just continue with action sequence after action sequence. But at the same time, I can't deny that's just a very minor nitpick because I was looking forward to just seeing what action was going to happen next. It's the one that I feel most inclined to go back and revisit, and that's why it is my favorite of the Fast and Furious franchise and comes in at number 1. But that is it for my ranking of the Fast and Furious franchise. Be sure to once again let me know down below in the comment section what is your ranking of all of the 11 movies. I would love to hear your list. I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and again, if you did enjoy it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button as well as that notification bell so you don't miss any further videos. And look forward to a bunch more videos and reviews coming soon. My name is Ben, people call me Meteor, and I'll see you guys in the next one.